The music stopped the moment Damon Vale raised his hand. Lena Marsh stood frozen in the middle of the Ashwood Hall, her fingers still laced with his, her heart still light from the last slow dance they had shared only seconds before. She did not understand why his face had changed, why his jaw had gone tight, why his eyes had turned cold and distant, as if she was suddenly a stranger to him. Then he pulled his hand away. "I cannot marry her," Damon said, his voice loud enough to reach every corner of the hall. "I will not tie my future, and the future of this park, to someone with weak blood." The words hit Lena like a slap. For a moment she thought she had misheard him. Around her, 300 guests from every noble park in the region went silent. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. Conversations died mid-sentence. Somewhere near the back, a woman gasped. "Damon," Lena whispered, "what are you saying?" He did not look at her. He looked past her, toward a young woman standing near the grand staircase, dressed in deep red, her chin lifted with quiet satisfaction. Seraphine Cole. Daughter of one of the oldest and strongest bloodlines in the territory. Lena had always thought Seraphine's friendliness toward Damon was nothing more than politeness between two families who had known each other for generations. She understood now how wrong she had been. "I have chosen someone worthy of standing beside the future leader of this park," Damon announced, walking away from Lena and toward Seraphine, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who believed he could do this without consequence. "Someone whose family strengthens ours, not weakens it." Laughter broke out in scattered pockets of the crowd, cruel and quiet, the kind of laughter that spreads faster than fire through dry grass. Lena felt her face burn. 3 years. 3 years of loyalty, of showing up for every park gathering on his arm, of learning the names of his relatives, of defending him when others doubted his character. 3 years, erased in front of everyone who mattered, in the space of a single sentence. She wanted to run. Her feet refused to move. Standing in the center of the hall, wearing the pale blue gown she had chosen so carefully that morning, Lena felt every eye in the room fix on her like blades. Some watched with pity. Others watched with open amusement. Nobody moved to help her. "Damon Vale," came a voice from the entrance, low and even, carrying an authority that silenced even the whispering crowd. "Is this how your park treats its own?" Every head in the hall turned at once. Standing in the doorway, framed by torchlight and the cold night air behind him, was a man Lena had never seen in person before, though she had heard his name spoken in hushed, respectful tones her whole life. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black and silver, with an unreadable calm on his face that suggested nothing could surprise him and nothing could threaten him. Cale Thorne. The Alpha King. Ruler of all 6 territories, a man whose court was 3 days' journey from Ashwood, a man who almost never left his own lands, let alone attended the gatherings of lesser parks. Nobody had announced his arrival. Nobody had expected him. The elders of Ashwood Park rose from their seats immediately, bowing low, their faces pale with shock and unease. Damon froze halfway between Lena and Seraphine, his earlier confidence draining from his face like water through open fingers. Even Seraphine's proud posture faltered. Cale did not look at any of them. His gaze moved slowly across the room until it settled on Lena, standing alone in her pale blue gown, humiliated in front of everyone she had ever known. He walked toward her. Every step he took seemed to stretch the silence longer, thinner, until it felt like the whole hall was holding its breath. Lena wanted to disappear. She had never felt so exposed, so raw, standing there while the most powerful man in the region crossed the floor directly toward her. He stopped in front of her and, to the shock of everyone watching, lowered himself onto one knee. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elders exchanged panicked glances. Damon's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I felt it the moment I stepped through that door," Cale said, his voice quiet now, meant only for her, though the silence of the room carried it to every corner anyway. "I have waited a long time to feel it. I did not expect to find it here, in the middle of a night when this park chose to throw it away." Lena's breath caught. "I do not understand." "You are my fated mate," Cale said simply, as if the words carried no weight at all, though they landed on the room like thunder. "I do not say this lightly, and I do not say it to shame this park further, though it seems they have done enough of that themselves tonight." Whispers erupted across the hall, no longer quiet, no longer careful. The Alpha King, the man whose court advisors had tried for years to arrange a match for him among the daughters of powerful families, the man who had turned away every offer, every proposal, every carefully staged introduction, was kneeling in front of a woman who, moments earlier, had been publicly rejected and mocked. Around the hall, the elders of Ashwood Park exchanged glances heavy with unspoken calculation, each one weighing what this sudden turn might mean for the standing of their own families. A king rarely traveled beyond his own territory without cause, and none among them had heard word of his approach before tonight. Some began whispering theories to one another behind raised hands, wondering whether this claim had been arranged in secret weeks earlier, whether Lena herself had somehow known and said nothing. Lena caught fragments of these theories drifting toward her and felt a fresh wave of disbelief settle over the shock already flooding her chest. Only minutes ago she had been the woman nobody wanted. Now she seemed to have become the woman everybody suddenly could not stop watching, and the shift felt almost as disorienting as the humiliation that had preceded it. Damon finally found his voice. This is a mistake. She is nothing. A minor bloodline, no standing, no. Careful, Cale said, still looking only at Lena, though the single word carried enough weight to silence Damon instantly. You have already said enough tonight to reveal exactly what kind of man you are. I would not add to it if I were you. Lena's hands trembled at her sides. Part of her wanted to believe this was some cruel twist added to an already cruel night, that the universe was simply finding new ways to humiliate her. But looking into Cale's eyes, she saw no mockery there. No pity either. Only a strange, steady certainty, as if he had walked into that hall already knowing what he would find. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Because you deserve better than a room full of people who let this happen to you, Cale answered. And because what I feel standing here is not something I control, and not something I intend to walk away from. He rose to his feet, and for the first time, looked toward Damon and the assembled elders of Ashwood Park. I am not here to demand anything from you tonight, Cale said, his voice carrying easily across the silent hall. I offer her a choice, not a command. She may come with me, or she may stay. That decision belongs to her, and to no one else in this room. All eyes turned back to Lena. Damon watched her with something between disbelief and fear, as if only now understanding what he had thrown away. Seraphine's earlier satisfaction had cuddled into something closer to worry. The elders of the park watched with the careful, calculating expressions of people trying to determine how this moment would affect their standing. Lena looked at Damon one last time. The man she had loved for 3 years suddenly seemed small to her, standing there in his fine clothes, surrounded by whispers he had brought upon himself. She thought of every evening she had spent defending him, every doubt she had silenced for his sake, every part of herself she had folded smaller so he would feel bigger beside her. She turned to Cale. I will come with you, she said, her voice steadier than she expected it to be, not because of what you have said about fate, but because I have nothing left here worth staying for. Something shifted in Cale's expression, something that was not quite a smile but held the same warmth. That is enough of a reason for tonight, he said. The rest we can discover together, if you are willing. He offered his hand. Lena looked down at it for a long moment. Behind her, she could feel the weight of every stair in the hall, the whispers already forming into stories that would spread across every park territory within days. Her old life, the one she had built around Damon's approval, around fitting into a future that was never truly meant for her, lay in pieces on the floor of that ballroom. She placed her hand in Cale's. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain, and together they walked the length of the hall, past long tables where guests sat frozen mid-conversation, past elders whose earlier pity had cuddled into something closer to awe, past Damon, who stood rooted in place, his mouth slightly open as though he still could not quite believe what he was watching unfold. Lena kept her chin level and her eyes forward the entire way, refusing to give anyone in that hall the satisfaction of watching her shrink one final time. She could feel dozens of eyes following her, no longer filled with pity but with something closer to disbelief, and for once their attention did not feel like a blade. It felt like the closing of a door she had spent 3 years standing in front of, too afraid to walk through. Leaving behind the stunned silence of Ashwood Park, leaving behind Damon and Seraphine and every whispered judgment that had followed her through that room, they stepped out into the cold night air, and Lina felt something she had not expected to feel after the humiliation of the evening. She felt, for the first time in a long while, that she was walking towards something rather than away from something. Behind them, the doors of Ashwood Hall closed, and the world Lina had known until that night closed with them. The carriage rocked beneath them as it climbed the mountain road, and Lina pressed her palm flat against the cold window glass, watching torchlight from the last village disappear behind a curtain of pine trees. 3 days had passed since the ballroom in Ashwood, 3 days of travel through territory she had never seen, guarded by silent soldiers who bowed whenever Cale passed and looked at her with open curiosity they tried and failed to hide. She had not slept properly since the night of the humiliation. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Damon's face turning cold, heard the laughter rippling through the crowd, felt the weight of every step pressing against her skin. She wondered, not for the first time, whether she had made the right choice in that hall, or whether she had simply traded one kind of danger for another she did not yet understand. Cale sat across from her, quiet, watching the passing landscape with the same calm expression he seemed to wear at all times. He had not pushed her to talk during the journey. He had not demanded gratitude, or affection, or explanations. He simply existed beside her, steady and unreadable, offering food when she was hungry and silence when she needed it. "You are thinking too loudly," he said suddenly, without turning from the window. Lina startled. "I did not say anything." "You do not need to," Cale answered. "Your thoughts have been circling the same worry since we left Ashwood. You are wondering if I brought you here for reasons that have nothing to do with what I said in that hall." She said nothing, because he was right, and there seemed little point in denying it. "I understand why you would think that," he continued. A king appearing suddenly, claiming a mate in front of an entire pack, offering no explanation beyond a feeling neither of us can fully put into words. "It would be strange if you did not question it." "Then convince me I am wrong to question it," Lina said, surprising herself with the sharpness in her own voice. Cale finally turned to look at her, and for a moment something almost like amusement crossed his face. "I do not intend to convince you of anything, Lina Marsh. I intend to show you, over time, through actions rather than words. Words are easy. Damon Vale used plenty of them, and look how quickly they turned to nothing." The mention of Damon's name still stung, though less sharply than it had 3 days ago. Lina turned back to the window, watching the mountains grow taller and darker as the carriage climbed higher into Cale's territory. By the time they reached the stronghold, night had fully settled over the mountains, and the fortress that rose before them looked less like a home and more like something carved from the rock itself. Towers stretched upward into the darkness, their windows glowing with warm light, and the great gates opened silently as the carriage approached, as if the entire structure had been waiting for their arrival. Servants gathered in the courtyard, bowing low as Cale stepped down and offered his hand to help Lina from the carriage. She could feel their eyes on her, curious and searching, trying to understand who this stranger was that their king had brought home so suddenly and with so little explanation. "Welcome to Untold," Cale said quietly, as they walked together toward the great doors. Inside, the fortress felt even larger than it had appeared from the courtyard. Stone corridors stretched in every direction, lit by torches and lined with tapestries depicting battles and ceremonies from ages long past. Lina felt impossibly small walking through halls built to house the ruler of 6 territories, halls that had likely never known the presence of someone like her. A young woman approached them from a side corridor, moving with quick, purposeful steps. She had the same dark hair as Cale, the same sharp, intelligent eyes, though her expression carried far more open curiosity than her brother's careful calm. "So this is her," the woman said, studying Lina with an intensity that made her want to shrink back. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "I am Elira, Cale's sister. I have heard the story from 3 different messengers already, each one more dramatic than the last. I am relieved to see the truth is finally standing in front of me instead of buried under exaggeration." "Elira," Cale said, a note of warning in his voice. "I am simply introducing myself," Elira replied, unbothered. "Someone in this fortress should be honest with her about what she has walked into." She turned back to Lina. "You will have questions. Many of them. I suggest you ask them freely, because the alternative is drowning in the whispers that are already spreading through this court." Lina appreciated the directness more than she expected to. What kind of whispers? The kind that always follow when a king suddenly claims a mate no one has heard of, Elira said. Some will assume you charmed your way into his favor. Others will assume he acted out of impulse, or spied toward a rival pack. Very few will consider the possibility that he simply told the truth in that hall. People rarely believe the simplest explanation when a more scandalous one is available. Kale sighed, though there was no real irritation behind it. My sister enjoys delivering difficult truths without warning. You will grow used to it. I would rather grow used to the truth than be surprised by it later, Lina said quietly. Elira's expression shifted into something more approving. Good. That will serve you well here. Over the following days, Lina began to understand the shape of the world she had entered. The fortress of Untold was not simply a home, but the center of political power for 6 territories, each with its own noble families, its own ambitions, its own histories of alliance and rivalry stretching back generations. Every conversation in its halls carried layers of meaning she was only beginning to learn to read. Every polite smile from a visiting noble might hide calculation. Every offered kindness might come with a hidden price. Kale spent his mornings in council with his advisors, discussing matters of territory and trade and old disputes between packs that Lina barely understood. In the afternoons, he often sought her out, walking with her through the fortress gardens or along the high walls that overlooked the mountains, asking about her life before Ashwood, her family, the years she had spent believing her future belonged beside Damon Vale. I do not want you to feel like a decoration in my court, Kale told her one afternoon, as they walked along a stone path lined with late autumn flowers. I know what it must look like from the outside. A humiliated woman rescued by a passing king, brought here to fill some role he decided she must play. I do not want that to be true, and I do not intend to let it become true. Then what do you want it to be? Lina asked. Kale considered the question carefully before answering. I want you to choose this life because you find something real in it, not because you have nowhere else to go. I know Ashwood left you with very few options. I do not want to become simply the safest one available. Lina studied his face, searching for the calculation Elira had warned her others might assume was hidden there. She found none. Only a strange, quiet honesty that unsettled her more than any performance of affection could have. I do not know yet what I feel, she admitted. 3 days ago, I believed my future was decided. Now everything feels uncertain, including my own thoughts. That is fair, Kale said. Uncertainty is not something I intend to rush you out of. One evening, unable to sleep, Lina wandered from the guest chambers she had been given and found herself in a long gallery lined with portraits, faces of kings and queens who had ruled Untold across generations she could barely count. She stopped before a painting of a woman with calm, steady eyes and a posture that seemed to carry the weight of an entire kingdom without bending beneath it. That is my mother, Kale's voice said from behind her, and Lina turned to find him standing in the gallery entrance, still dressed in the dark clothes he wore for evening council. She ruled beside my father for 30 years. People still speak of her with more respect than they show most kings. She looks fearless, Lina said, studying the painted eyes. She was not fearless, Kale replied, stepping closer to stand beside her. She simply refused to let fear decide her actions for her. There is a difference, I think, between having no fear at all and having fear but choosing not to let it rule you. Lina considered this for a long moment. I have been afraid since the night at Ashwood Hall. I am still afraid, if I am honest. Afraid this will not last, afraid I do not belong in halls like this one, afraid that everyone who looks at me is only waiting for the moment I prove them right to doubt me. Then you already understand what my mother knew, Kale said quietly. Fear does not disappear simply because you have made a brave choice. It simply becomes something you carry alongside the choice, rather than something that stops you from making it. They stood together in the quiet gallery a while longer, the portraits of long-dead rulers watching over them in silence, and Lina felt, for the first time since arriving at Untold, that the weight pressing on her chest had eased slightly, if only for that evening. Not everyone in the fortress shared his patience. Within the first week, Lina noticed a man who watched her with narrowed, calculating eyes whenever she passed through the council halls. Garrick Voss, one of Kale's senior advisors, a thin, sharp-featured man who had served the royal court for over a decade. He never spoke to her directly, but Elira warned her quietly one evening that Garrick had long hoped Kale would accept a match arranged among the daughters of allied noble families, strengthening old alliances rather than choosing someone with no political standing at all. He will not confront you outright, Elira said. Men like Garrick prefer quieter methods. Rumors. Doubts planted in careful conversations. Watch for it, because it will come. Lina took the warning seriously, though she did not yet understand how deeply it would matter. For now, she focused on learning the rhythms of her new life, the customs of the court, the names of the nobles she would eventually need to greet with confidence rather than confusion. Elira became an unexpected ally in this, spending hours teaching her the histories of the 6 territories, the proper forms of address for visiting dignitaries, the subtle signals that separated genuine respect from performed courtesy. Slowly, the fortress began to feel less like a strange prison and more like unfamiliar ground she was learning to stand on. And slowly, in quiet afternoons spent walking beside Kale through gardens and along stone walls, Lina began to wonder if the strange, sudden claim made in that ballroom might hold more truth in it than she had first allowed herself to believe. There were smaller moments too, ones that Lina would later remember more clearly than any grand ceremony or council session. A morning when Kale found her lost in the fortress kitchens, trying and failing to recreate a simple dish her grandmother once made, and instead of summoning a servant to help, he rolled up his sleeves and attempted it alongside her, the two of them filling the kitchen with flour and laughter rather than the careful formality expected of a king. An afternoon when a sudden mountain storm trapped them both beneath a stone archway in the garden, and rather than retreating indoors, they simply stood together watching the rain sweep across the valley below, saying very little, needing to say very little. A quiet evening when Elira taught her the proper steps of a court dance, and Kale, watching from the doorway, was pulled reluctantly into practicing it with her, stepping on her feet twice before either of them managed to stop laughing long enough to finish the dance properly. These small moments accumulated slowly, each one a quiet brick laid into a foundation neither of them spoke about directly, but both seemed to feel taking shape beneath them. Lina found herself, more and more often, looking forward to the hours she spent in Kale's company rather than dreading them, found herself thinking of Ironhold as somewhere closer to home than anywhere she had lived before, even Ashwood, even the rooms she had shared with her own family before Damon had entered her life at all. But even as she felt herself settling, a small unease remained, quiet but persistent, a feeling that the peace of these early days in Ironhold would not last forever. The first rumor reached Lina on a grey morning, carried not by Garrick Voss himself, but by a serving girl who whispered it to another while folding linens in a hallway Lina happened to be passing. She caught only fragments, enough to understand the shape of it. That she had used old, forbidden charms to force the bond with Kale. That the fated mate claim had been staged, arranged by Lina herself to escape her disgrace at Ashwood by trapping a king instead. She stood frozen in the corridor for a long moment after the servants noticed her and scattered, faces pale with embarrassment. The words followed her the rest of the day, echoing louder than anything Damon had said in that ballroom, because these words had followed her into a life she was only beginning to trust. She did not tell Kale immediately. Instead, she sought out Elira, finding her in the training yard practicing forms with a wooden blade, her dark hair tied back, sweat beading at her temples despite the cool mountain air. "You look like someone who just heard something they wish they had not," Elira said, lowering her blade the moment she saw Lina's expression. Lina repeated what she had overheard, watching Elira's face carefully for any sign of surprise. There was none. Only a tired, familiar frustration. "I told you it would come," Elira said. "Sooner than I expected, but I suppose Garrick does not believe in wasting time." She wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Forbidden charms. That is almost creative for him. Usually these rumors are simpler. Accusations of deception, ambition, seduction. Someone has decided that story alone was not damaging enough. Do people believe it? Lina asked. Some will, Elira admitted. Court gossip does not require truth to spread. It only requires an audience willing to repeat it. But not everyone believes what Garrick Seko whispers. My brother has enemies within his own advisors, and they have wanted him much elsewhere for years. This is simply their newest attempt. Should I confront Garrick directly? Elira considered this, resting the wooden blade against her shoulder. Not yet. Confrontation without proof only makes you look defensive, and defensiveness looks like guilt to people already inclined to suspect you. Better to learn how this court actually works before you challenge someone who has spent a decade mastering its games. And so Lina began, in earnest, to learn. Elira became her teacher in more than court customs now. She taught Lina how to read the difference between genuine alliance and performed friendliness among the visiting nobles, how certain phrases carried double meanings depending on who spoke them, how silence at the right moment could carry more authority than any spoken argument. Lina spent hours in the fortress library studying the histories of the 6 territories, memorizing bloodlines and old disputes, understanding for the first time the scale of the world Kale ruled and the countless threads of loyalty and resentment woven through it. She also began attending council sessions, seated quietly at the edge of the room at Kale's insistence, though several advisors clearly resented her presence there. Garrick in particular seemed to find new, subtle ways to question her worth without ever directly attacking her. "It is unusual," he remarked one afternoon, during a discussion about trade agreements with a neighboring territory, for someone with no formal training in matters of governance to sit in on discussions of this importance. "I mean no disrespect, of course. Simply an observation." "I am here to learn," Lina replied evenly, refusing to let her voice betray the discomfort his words stirred in her. "I would think a court benefits from those willing to understand its workings rather than remain ignorant of them." Garrick's thin smile did not reach his eyes. "A fair point. Though understanding takes years, not weeks." "Then I suppose I have years ahead of me to earn it," Lina said. Kale, seated at the head of the table, said nothing during this exchange, though Lina caught the faint approval in his expression afterward, once the council had adjourned and the room had emptied. "You handled him well," he told her, as they walked together through the corridor afterward. "He does not think I belong here," Lina said. "He thinks very few people belong anywhere near real power unless they were born into circles he approves of," Kale replied. "It has little to do with you specifically. Though I will admit, your presence challenges assumptions he has held for a long time." "Assumptions about what?" "That I would eventually accept the match he has quietly arranged for years, between myself and the daughter of the Ravermore family," Kale said. "A strategic alliance, strengthening old ties between our territories. He has invested considerable effort into that outcome. Your presence disrupts it entirely." Lina absorbed this new piece of the puzzle carefully. "So the rumors are not simply about doubting me. They are about protecting an outcome he has already decided upon." "Precisely," Kale said. "Which means they will not stop easily. I want you prepared for that, not frightened by it." She appreciated his honesty, even as it settled uneasily in her chest. The rumors continued in the weeks that followed, growing more elaborate with each retelling. Some claimed Lina had been sent by rival packs to weaken Kale's rule from within. Others suggested she had once been involved in dark practices back in Ashwood, practices that had led to her rejection by Damon in the first place, rather than the truth of his own betrayal. Each new version seemed designed to chip away at the same foundation, planting doubt not only among the court nobles, but potentially in Kale's own mind. It was during this uneasy stretch that the first real danger arrived, though not in the shape Lina expected. A diplomatic envoy from a distant territory arrived at Ironhold seeking an audience with Kale, requesting military support against raiders who had been attacking villages along their shared border. Lina, now familiar enough with council proceedings to understand the stakes, watched as Kale agreed to send a small force to investigate and assist. What she did not expect was the letter that arrived 3 days later, addressed directly to her, unsigned, warning her in careful, deliberate handwriting that her presence at Ironhold endangered lives beyond her own, and that she should leave before the consequences became irreversible. She brought the letter to Kale immediately, her hands trembling slightly as she handed it to him. His expression darkened as he read it, the calm mask he usually wore slipping into something colder, more dangerous. "This is not simply court gossip," he said. "This is a threat. Do you know who sent it?" "Not yet. But I intend to find out." He called for his personal guard captain immediately, a broad-shouldered man named Cohen who had served the royal family for over 15 years. Within hours, additional guards were assigned to Lina's movements throughout the fortress, and Cale ordered a quiet investigation into who among the staff or visiting nobles might have access to send such a message unnoticed. The investigation revealed little at first, only that the letter had been written on parchment common throughout the fortress, offering no clear trail back to its author. But the incident changed something in Cale's approach. He began keeping Lena closer during council sessions, insisted she never walked the fortress halls alone, and spent long evenings discussing with Corwin the possibility that someone within the court, perhaps even someone close to Garrick's circle, wanted her gone badly enough to resort to open threats rather than mere whispers. "I am sorry," Cale told her one evening, as they sat together in his private study, a fire crackling in the hearth beside them. "I brought you into a world I should have prepared you for more carefully. I did not expect the resistance to reach this far, this quickly." "You did not create this resistance," Lena said. "The people responsible for it did." "That does not make me feel less responsible for your safety," Cale replied. Lena studied him for a long moment, watching the firelight flicker across his features, the careful, controlled expression he wore in council rooms replaced now by something more honest, more worried. She realized, sitting there, that the distance she had maintained between them since arriving at Ironhold had begun to close without her fully noticing it happen. "I do not regret coming here," she said quietly. "Even with the threats, even with Garrick's schemes. I would rather face this than have spent the rest of my life pretending to be smaller than I am, for a man who never truly valued me." Something shifted in Cale's expression, warm and unguarded. "I am glad to hear that. Though I intend to make certain the threats do not continue unanswered." True to his word, Cale doubled the investigation efforts, and within 2 weeks, Corwin uncovered evidence linking the threatening letter to a minor noble family with distant ties to Garrick's political circle, a family hoping to curry favor by removing an obstacle to the Ravenmore alliance. The family was quietly stripped of certain trade privileges and formally warned, though Garrick himself remained frustratingly untouched by the investigation, his involvement, if any existed, carefully hidden behind layers of distance and denial. "He is careful," Elira observed, when Lena shared the news with her. "He will not make the mistake of leaving direct evidence behind. Whatever comes next from his circle will be even harder to trace." Lena absorbed this warning with a steadier resolve than she might have shown weeks earlier. The threats had frightened her, but they had also clarified something important. She was no longer simply the humiliated woman from Ashwood Hall, uncertain of her place in a new and unfamiliar world. She was becoming someone capable of standing within it, someone Cale trusted enough to include in matters of real consequence, someone the court schemers now considered dangerous enough to threaten. During this period of heightened caution, Elira insisted that Lena learn more than court customs and council etiquette. She began teaching her basic self-defense, insisting that a queen who could not protect herself, even in small ways, remained vulnerable regardless of how many guards surrounded her. "I do not expect you to become a warrior overnight," Elira said, guiding Lena's hands into a proper defensive stance in the training yard one crisp morning. "But I expect you to understand how to create distance, how to break free from a grip, how to buy yourself the seconds you would need until help arrives. Knowledge like this cannot be taken from you the way titles or reputations can." Lena trained with her most mornings after that, sore muscles and bruised knuckles becoming a strange, welcome reminder that she was building something within herself that no rumor or scheme could unravel. It was during one such session, weeks later, that the second attempt against her safety revealed itself, though not in the manner anyone at Ironhold expected. A hooded figure, later identified as a hired mercenary with no clear ties back to any single noble family, attempted to intercept Lena during what appeared to be a routine walk through the fortress's lower gardens, an area she had begun visiting alone in recent weeks as her confidence in the fortress grounds grew. The figure moved quickly, grabbing for her arm from behind a row of tall hedges, clearly intending to drag her toward a service gate that led beyond the fortress walls. Lena's training took over before conscious thought could catch up to instinct. She twisted free of the grip exactly as Elira had drilled into her for weeks, driving her elbow backward hard enough to stagger her attacker, then shouting loud enough that the nearest guards came running within seconds. The mercenary fled before he could be captured, disappearing over the outer wall before pursuit could catch him, but the message his attempt sent was unmistakable. Whoever wanted Lena removed from Ironhold had grown tired of subtlety. Cale arrived at the gardens moments after the guards, his expression a mixture of fury and barely restrained fear as he took in the scene, the torn sleeve of Lena's dress, the guards fanning out to search the grounds, Lena herself standing shaken but upright, refusing to be carried inside like someone too fragile to walk on her own. "I am unharmed," she told him immediately, before he could ask. "Elera's training saved me more than luck did tonight." Cale pulled her into an embrace that lasted longer than either of them likely intended in front of the gathered guards, his relief evident in the way his hands trembled slightly against her back. "I should never have allowed you to walk these grounds without an escort, regardless of how safe they seemed. You cannot lock me inside these walls out of fear," Lena said gently, pulling back enough to meet his eyes. "That would only hand Garrick and whoever else wants me gone a smaller kind of victory, one where I live the rest of my life too frightened to move freely through my own home." Cale studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes, respect mingling with the fear still lingering there. "Then we increase the guard rotation, and you continue your training with Elera twice as often. I will not cage you, Lena. But I will not lose you either." That shift did not go unnoticed by Cale either. In the weeks that followed, he began seeking her counsel more directly during private discussions of territory matters, valuing her outside perspective, unclouded by decades of old court politics. Their evenings together grew longer, conversations stretching from matters of governance into quieter, more personal territory, questions about childhood memories, favorite places, fears neither had spoken aloud before. "I did not expect to feel this comfortable with anyone so quickly," Lena admitted one night, as they walked along the high fortress walls beneath a clear, star-filled sky. "Neither did I," Cale said. "I have spent years assuming the fated bond, if it ever arrived, would feel like duty. An obligation to fulfill rather than something I might actually welcome. And now I find myself looking forward to evenings I once would have spent alone with council reports," Cale said, a rare, genuine smile crossing his face. "I consider that a significant change." Lena laughed softly, the sound surprising her with how natural it felt. For the first time since Ashwood Hall, she allowed herself to imagine a future in this place, not simply as someone tolerated within Cale's court, but as someone who truly belonged there. But even as that hope took root, quiet warnings continued to surface. Garrick's circle grew quieter rather than louder, and in Elera's experience, that silence was far more concerning than any open rumor. Somewhere within the walls of Untold, or perhaps beyond them, a larger plan was taking shape, one far more dangerous than whispered gossip or anonymous letters. In the days following the attack in the garden, Lena noticed a subtle change in how the court regarded her. Nobles who had once watched her with polite curiosity or thinly veiled suspicion now offered small nods of respect when she passed through the halls, word of her composure during the attack spreading quickly through the fortress. Even those who had quietly doubted whether an outsider from a minor pack could withstand the pressures of Untold's court began to reconsider their assumptions. Lena had not simply survived an attempt on her life. She had responded to it with the same calm resolve she brought to council sessions and diplomatic gatherings, and that consistency was beginning to earn her something rumors alone could never provide, genuine standing among people who valued strength shown under real pressure. Garrick, for his part, grew quieter still, watching these shifting tides with narrowed, calculating eyes from the edges of council sessions. Whatever plans he was forming next, he was clearly taking greater care to keep them hidden, aware now that Lena was neither as isolated nor as easily frightened as he had first assumed. Elera, noticing his continued silence, warned Lena once more that quiet conspirators were often more dangerous than loud ones, since silence gave them room to plan more carefully rather than reveal their intentions through desperate, hurried action. Lena took the warning seriously, but she refused to let it consume her days entirely. She continued her training each morning, continued attending council sessions with growing confidence, continued the quiet evenings spent with Cale that had become, without either of them quite naming it aloud, the steadiest and most cherished part of her new life. Whatever Garrick was planning next, whatever new danger waited beyond the fortress walls, Lena intended to meet it standing on her own 2 feet, not as the woman humiliated at Ashwood Hall, but as someone who had already proven, twice now, that she would not be so easily removed. Lena did not yet know how close that danger truly was, or how soon it would arrive at the fortress gates, wearing a face she once thought she had left behind forever at Ashwood Hall. The messenger arrived at Untold on a cold morning, carrying a formal request from Ashwood Park for a diplomatic audience regarding border trade rights between their territory and one of Cale's allied lands. Lina read the name signed at the bottom of the letter and felt her stomach tighten. Damon Vale would be leading the delegation himself. She brought the letter to Cale immediately, watching his expression carefully as he read it. "You do not have to be present for this audience," Cale said, setting the letter down. "I can arrange the meeting without requiring your attendance." "No," Lina said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her own voice. "I will be there." "I do not intend to hide from him as though I am still the woman standing humiliated in that ballroom." Cale studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Then we face him together." Damon arrived 3 days later, accompanied by a small delegation of Ashwood elders and, to Lina's quiet surprise, Seraphine Cole herself, dressed in fine traveling clothes, her expression carefully composed into polite neutrality. Lina stood beside Cale in the great hall as the delegation was announced, watching Damon's eyes widen slightly when he saw her, though he quickly schooled his expression into something more diplomatic. "Your Majesty," Damon said, bowing low before Cale, "we are grateful for your willingness to discuss trade matters between our territories." "The border dispute is a straightforward matter," Cale replied evenly. "I trust we can resolve it efficiently." The formal negotiations proceeded through the following 2 days with surprising smoothness, discussions of trade routes and tariff agreements handled through careful diplomatic language between advisors on both sides. Lina attended several sessions, noting how Damon avoided direct eye contact with her whenever possible, though Seraphine watched her with an intensity that suggested far more was happening beneath the surface than simple border negotiations. The truth of it emerged on the 3rd evening, during a formal dinner held in the Great Hall to mark the conclusion of trade discussions. Elira found Lina in a quiet corridor before the meal began, her expression tense. "Garrick has been meeting privately with the Ashwood delegation," she said quietly. "3 times since their arrival, always late in the evening, always in rooms far from the main council chambers." "Do you know what they discussed?" "Not with certainty. But I have my suspicions, and none of them are comforting." Earlier that same afternoon, Lina had crossed paths with Damon alone in a quiet corridor near the Fortress Library, both of them clearly startled by the unexpected encounter. For a long moment, neither spoke, the weight of everything unsaid between them filling the narrow space. "You look well," Damon finally offered, his voice lacking its old confidence. "Better than well, actually. Being here suits you." "I did not expect kindness from you," Lina said carefully, unwilling to let her guard down simply because his tone had softened. "I am not certain it was kindness," Damon admitted. "Perhaps only honesty, which I suppose I owed you long before now." He hesitated, glancing down the empty corridor as though checking they were truly alone. "I have not been proud of myself since that night, Lina. I let ambition and Seraphine's family's promises convince me that humiliating you would strengthen my standing. I was wrong, and the months since have made that painfully clear." Lina studied him, searching for the manipulation Elira had one might hide behind such words, but found only the tired, hollow expression of a man confronting consequences he had not fully anticipated. "An apology does not undo what happened in that hall, Damon." "I know that," he said quietly. "I do not expect it to. I only wanted you to hear it, regardless of what happens during these negotiations." She left him standing in the corridor without responding further, uncertain whether his words carried genuine remorse or simply another layer of calculation she had not yet learned to see through. The uncertainty followed her into the great hall that evening, coloring her instincts as the formal dinner began, and though she wanted to believe his apology sincere, some quiet part of her remained braced for exactly the kind of betrayal that unfolded only hours later. The dinner proceeded with careful formality, toast exchanged between the two territories, polite conversation flowing around matters of trade and shared prosperity. It was near the end of the meal, as servants began clearing the final courses, that Garrick rose from his seat, requesting a moment to address the assembled guests. "Before we conclude this evening," Garrick began, his voice carrying the practiced smoothness of a man who had planned every word in advance, "I believe there is a matter of some delicacy that deserves the court's attention. Concerning the circumstances under which our king's chosen companion first arrived among us." Lina felt the room's attention shift toward her, and beside her, she felt Cale go still. "Choose your next words carefully, Garrick," Cale said, his voice low and controlled, though the warning beneath it was unmistakable. "I intend no disrespect, Your Majesty," Garrick continued, undeterred. Simply a concern for the court's well-being. It has come to my attention that certain members of the Ashwood delegation possess information relevant to Lena Marsh's character, information that predates her arrival here and may bear on whether she remains a suitable companion for the crown. Damon shifted uncomfortably in his seat, though Seraphine's expression remained carefully composed, almost expectant. What information? Cale asked, his eyes narrowing. Garrick gestured towards Seraphine, who rose gracefully from her seat. Perhaps Lady Seraphine can speak to this more directly than I can. Seraphine's voice, when she spoke, carried a rehearsed sincerity that made Lena's skin crawl. I do not wish to cause distress, she began, but the court deserves honesty. Before the events at Ashwood Hall, there were concerns within our pack regarding Lena's conduct, involving improper communications with visiting nobles from rival territories, communications that suggested divided loyalties. Damon's decision that evening, while perhaps handled without proper grace, was not without foundation. The claim landed in the hall like a stone dropped into still water, ripples of murmured reaction spreading among the seated nobles. Lena felt heat rush to her face, though this time it was not shame but fury building beneath her skin. That is a lie, she said, her voice cutting clearly through the murmurs. Is it? Seraphine asked, her composure unwavering. I understand this is difficult to hear. But several members of our pack witnessed these communications firsthand. Lena turned to Damon directly, meeting his eyes for the first time since his arrival. Tell them the truth, Damon. Tell this room exactly what happened at Ashwood Hall, and why. Damon's gaze flickered between Lena, Seraphine, and Garrick, clearly caught in a trap he had not fully anticipated becoming this public. I believe, Cale said, before Damon could answer, his voice carrying an edge of controlled anger that silenced the murmuring hall instantly, that we should examine this claim with the same seriousness it demands. Fabricated accusations against a member of my court are not a small matter, regardless of who brings them forward. He turned to Corwin, standing near the hall entrance. Bring forward any correspondence or witnesses Lady Seraphine claims exist to support this accusation. I want names, dates, and evidence, not simply assertions offered over dinner. Seraphine's composure faltered slightly for the first time. Such evidence would take time to gather properly, Your Majesty. Then we will wait, Cale said. In the meantime, I would remind this hall that accusations without evidence carry no weight in my court, regardless of who speaks them or what alliance they hope to protect. The dinner ended in uncomfortable silence shortly afterward, the Ashwood delegation retreating to their assigned quarters with visibly diminished confidence. Lena remained in the hall long after most guests had departed, her hands still trembling slightly with the aftermath of anger and adrenaline. That was well handled, Elira said, appearing beside her once the hall had mostly emptied. It did not feel handled, Lena replied. It felt like watching my past reach out to strangle my present. Garrick and Seraphine underestimated something important tonight, Elira said. They assumed accusations alone would be enough to plant doubt. They forgot that my brother does not deal in assumptions. He deals in evidence, and evidence is exactly what they do not have. Cale found Lena later that evening, standing alone on the fortress walls, staring out at the dark mountains beyond. He approached quietly, standing beside her without speaking for a long moment. I am sorry you had to endure that tonight, he finally said. I am tired of enduring things, Lena replied. I am tired of being the person others decide to humiliate whenever it serves their purposes. Then let us make certain this is the last time it happens, Cale said. I do not intend to let this accusation stand unanswered. Corwin will investigate thoroughly, and I suspect what we find will expose far more than a single false claim. His prediction proved accurate within days. Corwin's investigation revealed that no witnesses existed to support Seraphine's accusation, and further digging uncovered private correspondence between Garrick and members of the Ashwood delegation, arranged weeks before their arrival at Untold, discussing how best to discredit Lena's standing at court in exchange for Garrick's continued support of trade advantages favorable to Ashwood Park. The evidence, once gathered, painted a clear picture. Garrick, desperate to prevent Cale's bond with Lena from solidifying and threatening the Ravenmore alliance he had spent years arranging, had reached out to Damon and Seraphine, offering trade concessions in exchange for their willingness to publicly discredit Lena during the diplomatic visit. Damon, still bitter over losing standing after his humiliation of Lena had backfired so spectacularly, had agreed readily, hoping to weaken Cale's position and perhaps reclaim some measure of the influence he had lost. When confronted with the evidence in a private council session, Damon's careful diplomatic composure finally cracked entirely. "You have no right to interfere in matters between parks," he said, his voice rising with barely contained anger. "She was mine long before she was yours. I simply wanted." "You wanted to punish her for finding a life better than the one you offered," Cale interrupted, his voice cold and final. "And you were willing to lie in front of an entire diplomatic hall to do it. That tells this court everything it needs to know about your character, Damon Vale." The Ashwood delegation departed Untold 2 days later, their trade negotiations concluded on far less favorable terms than they had originally hoped, their reputation among the assembled nobility significantly damaged by the exposed conspiracy. Seraphine left without meeting Lena's eyes even once, her earlier confidence replaced by something closer to quiet humiliation. Damon offered no farewell at all, departing in silence, the weight of his exposed scheme settling over him like a shadow he could not escape. Lena thought often, in the days that followed, about her brief encounter with Damon in the corridor, wondering whether his quiet apology had been genuine after all, or simply one more piece of a scheme that had unraveled faster than he expected. She did not seek him out again before his departure, unwilling to open a door she had already spent months carefully closing. Whatever remorse he felt, real or performed, belonged to his own conscience now, not to a life she no longer shared with him. Garrick remained at Untold, though his position within the court had weakened considerably. Cale did not remove him from his advisory role immediately, wanting first to understand the full extent of his schemes and whether other conspirators remained hidden within the court's walls. But the balance of power had shifted, and everyone within Untold understood it. Lena stood once again on the fortress walls that evening, this time with Cale beside her, watching the last of the Ashwood delegation's torches disappear down the mountain road. "It is strange," she said quietly. "I thought seeing Damon again would break something in me. Instead, I feel nothing looking at him leave. Only relief." "That is not strange," Cale said. "That is simply the truth finally settling into place. You have spent this evening watching the last piece of your old life walk away, taking its lies and its false claims with it. And what remains?" Lena asked. Cale turned to face her fully, his expression softer than she had seen it before, stripped of the careful control he wore during council sessions and diplomatic negotiations. "What remains is a choice, still yours to make, about the future you want to build here. Garrick's schemes have failed. Damon's lies have been exposed. Whatever comes next, it will not be shaped by their interference any longer." Lena looked out at the dark mountains, feeling the weight of the past months settle into something clearer, steadier than it had felt since the night at Ashwood Hall. The threats had not disappeared entirely, she suspected, and Garrick's diminished influence did not mean his ambitions had vanished completely. But for the first time since arriving at Untold, she felt the ground beneath her feet solidify into something she could trust. "I want to build a future here," she said finally. "Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I have found something worth staying for." Cale's hand found hers on the stone wall, warm and steady. "Then let us build it together." Behind them, the fortress lights glowed warm against the darkening sky, and somewhere within its walls, Garrick Voss sat alone in his private chambers, already beginning to calculate his next move. Garrick Voss did not surrender easily, and within weeks of the Ashwood delegation's humiliating departure, Cowen's investigators uncovered signs that his ambitions had not ended, only changed shape. Letters intercepted between Garrick and representatives of the Ravenmore family revealed a new plan taking form, one far more dangerous than rumors or false accusations. If Garrick could not discredit Lena through gossip, he intended instead to remove her from Cale's protection entirely, arranging for her to be lured beyond the fortress walls under false pretenses, where Ravenmore agents waited to ensure she never returned to complicate their long-planned alliance. Cowen brought the intercepted letters to Cale late one evening, his expression grim. "This is no longer a matter of court politics," he said. "This is a direct threat against her safety." Cale read the letters twice, his jaw tightening with each line. "How soon is this plan meant to unfold?" "Within the week, based on the timeline described here. There is mention of an invitation, something that would draw her outside the fortress walls under a pretense she has no reason to doubt. Cale called Lina to his study immediately, and together with Corwin and Elira, they reviewed the intercepted correspondence in full. Lina felt a cold unease settle over her as she read the careful, calculated plans laid out in Garrick's precise handwriting, plans that treated her safety as nothing more than an obstacle to be efficiently removed. "We could confront him now," Elira suggested. "Bring him before the full council with this evidence and end this immediately. If we move too early, he may have contingencies we do not yet understand," Cale said. "Better to let his plan unfold just far enough to expose not only his intentions, but the full extent of Ravenmore's involvement. If we act now, Garrick may claim these letters were forged, and the Ravenmore family may distance themselves before we can prove their complicity." Lina listened to the strategy taking shape around her, and though fear paused steadily beneath her calm exterior, she found herself unwilling to simply hide while others decided her fate. "I want to be part of this," she said. "Not simply the target Garrick is planning around, but someone actively working to expose him." Cale studied her for a long moment, clearly weighing his instinct to protect her against his growing respect for her judgment. "What do you propose?" "Let his plan proceed, as you suggested," Lina said. "But let me walk into it aware, prepared, surrounded by guards Garrick does not expect. Let him believe his plan is succeeding right up until the moment it fails completely, in front of witnesses who cannot deny what they see." The plan took shape over the following days. When the expected invitation arrived, disguised as a request from a minor noble family for a private meeting regarding potential trade opportunities just beyond the fortress boundaries, Lina accepted it exactly as Garrick's scheme anticipated. What the conspirators did not know was that Corwin's most trusted guards, along with Elira herself, would be shadowing her movement at a careful distance, ready to intervene the moment the trap revealed itself. The meeting was arranged at a small lodge nestled in the foothills below Untold, a location chosen deliberately for its distance from the fortress and its proximity to the border where Ravenmore agents could easily cross undetected. Lina arrived with a small escort, appearing to the watching conspirators as nothing more than a modest diplomatic visit, unaware of the danger surrounding her. She had barely settled into the lodge's main room when the true nature of the gathering revealed itself. 3 armed men entered from a rear passage, their intentions unmistakable in the tension of their postures and the weapons visible at their sides. Behind them, a 4th figure emerged, one Lina recognized immediately from court gatherings as a senior representative of the Ravenmore family, a cold, calculating woman named Kasha Vane. "I regret that it has come to this," Kasha said, her voice carrying none of the warmth her words suggested. "But some obstacles cannot simply be reasoned away. Garrick assures us your removal will restore proper order to the court, and I am inclined to trust his judgment on such matters." "You assume this will go unanswered," Lina said, her voice steadier than she felt, though the fear pulsing through her chest sharpened every sense into painful clarity. "Who exactly do you expect to answer it?" Kasha asked, a thin smile crossing her face. "Your guards are minimal, your location isolated, and by the time anyone at Untold realizes something has gone wrong, you will already be far from any territory Cale Thorne controls." It was at that precise moment that the lodge's front door burst open, and Corwin entered with a full contingent of Cale's finest guards, Elira at his side, her wooden training blade replaced now with a weapon of real steel. Kasha's confident expression shattered instantly into panic as the small lodge filled with armed soldiers loyal to the crown, far more than her own hired men could hope to resist. "You should have considered," Elira said calmly, "that a king who claims a mate as publicly as my brother did does not leave her protection to chance, regardless of how carefully your plans were disguised." The confrontation ended swiftly, Kasha's men surrendering without meaningful resistance once they understood the scale of the force arrayed against them. Kasha herself was taken into custody, along with sealed correspondence found in her possession that confirmed not only her own involvement, but explicit communication with Garrick detailing the entire scheme from its earliest planning stages. Cale arrived at the lodge within the hour, having ridden ahead of the main escort the moment word reached him that the trap had been sprung successfully. He found Lina standing calmly amid the aftermath, shaken but unharmed, and the relief that crossed his face when their eyes met told her more clearly than any words how deeply he had feared for her safety during the tense hours of waiting. "You are unharmed," he said, crossing the room quickly to take her hands in his. "I am," Lina confirmed. "And we have exactly what we needed." Kasha's own words confirm everything: her involvement, Garrick's planning, the full scope of what they intended. Cale's expression hardened with quiet, controlled fury. Then Garrick's time at Untold has finally reached its end. The confrontation that followed, 2 days later in the full council hall of Untold, drew every noble family currently residing at court, along with representatives from neighboring territories who had gathered for what they believed would be routine diplomatic proceedings. Instead, they witnessed the complete unraveling of a conspiracy that had quietly threatened the stability of Cale's court for months. Garrick stood before the assembled council, his usual composed confidence entirely absent, replaced by the pale, tight expression of a man who understood the evidence arrayed against him left no room for denial. Corwin presented the intercepted letters one by one, reading aloud the careful, damning correspondence between Garrick and Kasha Vane, detailing months of planning aimed at removing Lena from Cale's protection through whatever means necessary. "I acted," Garrick said finally, his voice lacking its usual smooth confidence, "in what I believed were the best interests of this court's stability. The Ravenmore alliance would have strengthened our territory standing for generations." "You acted to protect your own influence," Cale said, his voice carrying cold, absolute authority across the silent hall. "You conspired to remove a member of this court through violence, disguised as diplomacy. That is not the action of a man serving his territory's stability. That is the action of a man serving only himself." Garrick was formally stripped of his position and is standing within the court, exiled from Untold's territory entirely, forbidden from ever returning to any lands under Cale's rule. Kasha Vane faced similar consequences from her own family, the Ravenmore elders swiftly distancing themselves from her actions once the full evidence became public, eager to avoid further damage to their own standing among the 6 territories. Word of the conspiracy's collapse spread quickly beyond Untold's walls, reaching every territory and park within the region, including, eventually, Ashwood Park itself. Damon Vale, already diminished by his earlier exposed scheme with Seraphine, found his standing further damaged by association with a plot that had ultimately failed so completely and so publicly. Within the park's own hierarchy, whispers began circulating questioning his judgment, his character, the same whispers that had once followed Lena through Ashwood Hall now settling instead around the man who had humiliated her there. Lena felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a quiet sense that the truth had finally found its proper place, no longer buried beneath false accusations or carefully staged humiliations. She had spent months proving, through action rather than argument, that she belonged within Untold's walls, that the fated bond Cale had claimed in that ballroom carried real weight rather than impulsive folly. The conspiracies aimed at removing her had, in the end, only strengthened her position, revealing to the entire court exactly how far her enemies were willing to go, and exactly how completely they had failed. In the quiet weeks between the conspiracy's collapse and the ceremony that followed, Lena found herself reflecting often on the distance she had traveled since the night at Ashwood Hall. She wrote a letter to her own family, the first real correspondence she had sent since leaving, describing not the crown that awaited her, but the strength she had discovered within herself along the way, strength she doubted she would have ever uncovered had her old life continued undisturbed. Her mother's reply arrived weeks later, warm and proud, expressing regret that she had not seen sooner how small Damon had always made her daughter feel, and gratitude that fate, however strange its timing, had finally led Lena somewhere she could stand tall. Cale, too, used those quiet weeks to strengthen the council itself, replacing Garrick's vacant seat with a younger advisor known for fairness rather than ambition, and consulting Lena directly on several matters of territory policy, valuing her judgment now not as a formality, but as a genuine partnership in the work of governing 6 territories. Elira remarked, more than once, that she had never seen her brother rule with such open collaboration, and that whatever doubts the court had once carried about Lena's place among them had long since been replaced by quiet, settled respect. 3 months after the conspiracy's collapse, Cale called for a formal ceremony to be held in the Great Hall of Untold, inviting representatives from every territory and park within the 6 lands, including, pointedly, a formal invitation extended to Ashwood Park itself. Elira helped Lena prepare for the occasion, selecting a gown of deep silver that caught the light like moonlight on still water, far removed from the pale blue dress she had worn the night Damon humiliated her before the entire park. "You look nothing like the woman who arrived here months ago," Elira said, adjusting the final details of Lena's appearance. "Not because the gown is finer, though it certainly is. Because you carry yourself differently now. Like someone who knows exactly where she belongs." I could not have gotten here without you, Lina said. Your guidance, your honesty, your willingness to warn me of dangers I did not yet understand. Elira smiled warmly. You did the rest yourself. I simply pointed you toward the path. You are the one who walked it. The great hall, when Lina entered it that evening, looked nothing like the space she had first encountered upon arriving at Untold months earlier. Every noble family of the 6 territories filled the seats, along with a former delegation from Ashwood Park, seated near the back of the hall, their expressions carefully neutral though the tension in their postures suggested they understood exactly what significance this ceremony held. Cale stood at the front of the hall, dressed in formal ceremonial attire, his expression carrying none of the careful control he wore during council sessions, only open warmth as he watched Lina walk the length of the hall toward him. 6 months ago, Cale began, once Lina had joined him at the front of the assembled court, his voice carrying easily across the silent hall. I stood in a different hall, in a different territory, and made a claim that many in this room likely doubted. I claimed a woman as my fated mate, a woman who had, only moments before, been publicly humiliated by someone unworthy of her loyalty. Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd, and Lina caught sight of the Ashwood delegation shifting uncomfortably in their seats. In the months since, Cale continued, that woman has proven herself not simply worthy of the claim I made that night, but essential to the strength and stability of this court. She has faced conspiracies aimed at removing her, threats against her safety, lies designed to discredit her character, and through every challenge, she has responded not with retreat, but with resolve. He turned to face Lina fully, taking her hands in his. I do not offer this crown as a political convenience, or as a reward for enduring hardship. I offer it because I have watched this woman earn her place within these walls through courage, wisdom, and a strength that has only grown clearer with every trial placed before her. The former crown, an intricate circlet of silver woven with pale stones that caught the torchlight like captured starlight, was brought forward on a velvet cushion by Corwin himself. Cale lifted it carefully and placed it upon Lina's head, the weight of it settling with a significance that felt, to Lina, like the final closing of a chapter she had once believed would define the rest of her life with shame rather than strength. I present to this court, Cale announced, his voice carrying triumphant clarity across the hall, Lina Thorne, Queen of the 6 territories, chosen not through obligation, but through a bond proven true by trial and time. The hall erupted into applause, nobles rising from their seats, voices calling out formal greetings and blessings for the newly crowned queen. Even the Ashwood delegation rose, their applause more restrained but present nonetheless, unable to deny the significance of the moment unfolding before them. Lina scanned the crowd until her eyes found the delegation from her former pack, noting the careful, distant expression on Damon's face as he watched the ceremony conclude. She felt, looking at him, none of the shame or anger that had once consumed her in that other ballroom, months and a lifetime ago. Only a quiet, settled peace, the understanding that the humiliation he had inflicted upon her that night had, in the end, led her not toward ruin, but toward exactly the life she had been meant to find all along. After the ceremony concluded and the formal celebrations began, Lina found a quiet moment alone with Cale on the same fortress walls where they had once stood discussing threats and uncertain futures. Now, beneath a clear night sky filled with stars, the mountains stretching dark and peaceful in every direction, the uncertainty that had once colored their conversations had settled into something far steadier. Do you remember, Cale asked, what you told me, that first night in the carriage, when I asked what you were thinking? I remember, Lina said. I told you I did not know if I had made the right choice, leaving Ashwood behind. And now? Lina looked out at the mountains, feeling the weight of the crown settled properly upon her head, feeling the strength of everything she had endured and overcome in the months since that carriage ride into unfamiliar territory. Now I know it was the only choice that could have led me here. Not simply to a crown, or to a title, but to a life where I am valued exactly as I am, tested and proven rather than assumed and dismissed. Cale pulled her closer, the warmth of the moment settling around them both like something solid and lasting. Then let us build the rest of this life together, exactly as we have built everything since that night in Ashwood Hall. Through trial, through trust, and through choices made freely rather than forced by circumstance. Below them, the fortress of Untold glowed warm against the mountain darkness, its halls no longer filled with whispered conspiracies or careful political calculations, but with the settled peace of a court that had weathered its trials and emerged stronger for having faced them honestly. Lena Thorne, once humiliated before an entire pack, now stood as queen over 6 territories, her past no longer a source of shame, but the foundation upon which her strength had been built. The story that had begun with public humiliation in a crowded ballroom had found its ending not in bitterness or revenge, but in a quiet, hard-earned peace, the kind that comes only to those who refuse to let cruelty define the rest of their lives, choosing instead to build something stronger from its ashes.